Okay, I'm going to hand this over quickly to our city staff partners who are here in the webinar with us. Vincent, would you like to start?
Yes, can you hear me? Ryan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Vince Lucchese. I'm with the city in the engineering department, and I have been the lead of this effort from the city side in getting the plan in front of you tonight, and we're very happy that you've joined us.
Great.
Thank you, Vince. And thank you all for attending this meeting. My name is Falguni Amin. I'm Principal Engineer in Design Division of Public Works Engineering. This is where the project is being handled. Vince is part of the Design Division. So again, thank you so much for attending the meeting. We are looking forward to hear back from you. Thank you.
Thank you both. And our city staff partners are going to be here listening in to all comments and making sure that we capture everything that we can. My name again is Ryan. I'm the Director of Digital Engagement with MIG. My colleague, Vanessa Hostetler, is here as well. She's an accessibility specialist and has been a technical expert in creating this plan and will be available to help answer questions about the whys and the hows of this plan. The purpose of this meeting is to review the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan prepared by the City of Santa Clara. And we're going to go through a little bit of why, a little bit of the process, a little bit of orientation to the document overall. I'm going to try really hard to make sure that you know exactly where to go to look at specific topics in the document and to clarify where and how to make formal comments during this public review period. This isn't a public meeting for testimony. We're here to help you find the relevant material and to know where to provide official comments and questions. We will be accepting comments through the chat function. And again, please include your name and email address. Actually, sorry, not the chat function, but the Q&A function button on your screen. Your staff team will follow up based on that information. And we'll also talk at the end of the presentation about additional methods to provide comments if you would rather do that through other channels. A little bit about the why. The Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted in the early 1990s as a civil rights law. It prohibits discrimination based on disability. This law provides all people with a disability or not the right to participate in all aspects of life, be it taking a recreation class, voting, serving jury duty, or crossing the street. Accessibility is not just about physical access, such as adding a ramp where steps exist. Accessibility is much more, and it requires looking at how programs, services, and activities are delivered. When President Herbert Walker Bush signed this law on July 26, 1990, he said emphatically, "Let the shameful walls of exclusion finally come tumbling down." This neatly encapsulates a simple yet long overdue message of the ADA that millions of Americans with disabilities are full-fledged citizens and as such are entitled to legal protections that ensure equal opportunity and access to the mainstream of American life. Before the ADA, there was Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Broader than any national disability law that came before it, Section 504 made it illegal for the federal government, federal contractors, or any entity receiving federal financial assistance to discriminate on the basis of disability. This means there can be additional requirements for public entities that are receiving federal funding, such as the requirement for recipients of federal funding from the Department of Transportation to maintain a record of complaints of noncompliance. On the slide here, we have an image of wheelchair users and other people with disabilities at a rally in San Francisco. They have a sign that reads, "We shall overcome," and equal opportunity for all. It's part of the disability rights protest. The ADA is comprised of 5 titles, which cover all aspects of life in the United States. Different titles provide guidance to different facets of life and providing services within those realms. Title I protects every employee or job applicant with a disability from discrimination. And it requires that employers make reasonable modifications to work environments and tasks. Title II, which we're going to be talking a lot about tonight, is the title that addresses state and local public agencies and the services, programs, and activities they provide. Title III covers the private and nonprofit organizations, including restaurants, offices, and commercial establishments. Title IV addresses telecommunications services for individuals with hearing impairment and speech impairments. Title V sets forth miscellaneous provisions, such as requiring the U.S. Access Board to issue accessibility standards, which is a big part of the guidance that we rely on. Allows for attorney's fees to be awarded to prevailing parties in suits filed under the ADA, requires federal agencies to provide technical assistance, and states specifically that illegal drug use is not a covered disability, and provides that the state and local laws that mandate equal or greater protection to individuals with disabilities are not superseded or limited by the ADA. So Title II agencies, Santa Clara being one of them, are required to ensure all their programs and services are accessible and usable by all. Public agencies are required to complete a self-evaluation of their policies, programs, and activities and services, and identify and implement modifications needed to all of those. They are also required to develop a transition plan if the agency employs 50 or more people, to remove physical barriers if the self-evaluation identifies modifications that are needed in order to provide access to programs. This federal mandate was published in 1992 and remains in effect today. Required to involve people with disabilities in both the self-evaluation process and the transition plan preparation, and to notify the public of rights and protections provided by the ADA for access to public programs, activities, and services. Develop and publish an ADA grievance or complaint procedure. Designate the staff responsible for implementation of the self-evaluation and transition plan and the grievance procedure. This person is often referred to as an ADA coordinator. And continue to remove barriers and accommodate members of the public with disabilities and document our progress on those efforts. And the city is involved in the process right now of completing those requirements, including identifying the overall efforts that will be completed as part of this project, involving the ADA committee and performing public outreach, performing a self-evaluation, reviewing policies, programs, and services, evaluating physical barriers in city facilities and public right-of-way, creating a transition plan by prioritizing removal of the physical barriers that were found. And the point where we're at today is to present the draft self-evaluation and transition plan for public review and comment. So this plan, the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan, supports the city's effort to fulfill all the requirements set forth in Title II of the ADA. We're going to orient you generally to the report. It starts off with an executive summary and then 8 sections. The introduction that gives an overview of accessibility regulations requiring the development of this plan, the self-evaluation of programs, activities, services, provides recommendations for the corrective actions for the city's provision of services. The transition plan identifies the architectural barriers, recommendations for barrier removal activities, and a strategy and timeline for completion of that work. Section 4 further details considerations and triggers for barrier removal. The report also defines and establishes the city's ADA coordinator position, a notice policy and grievance procedure. A copy of the city's current policy and grievance procedure are attached to this report. And in addition, the report has a section on definitions and a list of state, federal, and local resources. Plan provides a framework for managing, planning, and implementing improvements that will require time, effort, and expense on the part of the city on a continuing basis for many years. So ADA Title II applies to all programs, services, or activities at the city, and a program is an activity or service provided by the city that's available to the public. A couple of examples are checking out a library book, or requesting information about a city service, or attending a public meeting. Could also be interacting with the website or using a public sidewalk or curb ramp. So program accessibility is introduced in the first section of this report. Under Title II, a public entity shall operate each service, program, or activity so that the service, program, or activity, when viewed in its entirety, is readily accessible to and usable by individuals with disabilities. So the ADA recognizes that a request may not be able to be accommodated if the city can demonstrate that an action or request would result in a fundamental alteration of the nature of the service, program, or activity, or in undue financial and administrative burdens. However, the ADA regulations allow alternative methods to be used to achieve program accessibility. It's always best to work with the person requesting a modification to find a solution that works best for them and for the city. These limits to the Title II obligations are detailed in section 4.3 on page 4-7 of the plan. Also required by the ADA Title II, the city shall provide an opportunity to interested persons, including individuals with disabilities or organizations representing individuals with disabilities, to participate in the self-evaluation process and the development of the transition plan by submitting comments. The City of Santa Clara established an Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA committee. Meetings are held on an as-needed basis. Members of the public are invited to attend the meetings and participate in the various accessibility issues discussed. The ADA committee was consulted in the development of the plan in March of 2019, and a community outreach meeting took place in April of 2019 to introduce the project and receive feedback on the development of this plan. Updates to the plan were presented and discussed at the ADA committee in May of 2023, and currently the public review draft of the plan is published on the city's website for comment through November 17th, 2023. The public involvement is described in section 1.6 of the plan, which is on page 1-5. We're going to talk a little bit more about that comment period at the end of the presentation again. So the city's ADA self-evaluation is detailed in section 2. The self-evaluation process identifies barriers and makes recommendations to correct services, policies, and practices that are inconsistent with Title II regulations and result in limitations to access for people with disabilities. Santa Clara's self-evaluation process included a staff questionnaire to help understand and evaluate the city's practices, a review of the city's policies and programs, including city code, policies and administrative rules, public documents, forms, and applications, as well as a wide range of the city's program offerings. A review of the city's standard details and specifications for construction in the public right-of-way, and physical audits of facilities and pedestrian improvements in the public right-of-way to locate barriers to access. The plan contains findings and recommendations in several service categories. The specific categories are listed and described in section 2.2. Recommendations in the plan are based on ADA requirements and survey results from a staff questionnaire and will assist with making their modifications to city programs, services, and activities, adjustments to existing policies, and improvement to inclusivity in city policies and standards. In many cases, people with disabilities will make requests to city staff for actions that will assist them in receiving services. For example, a person with low vision may request a large print version of a printed report, or a person with a hearing loss may request a written transcript of a verbal report or presentation. The city performed physical audits of city facilities, which included 40 public buildings and 41 public parks or trails. The city also performed physical evaluations of the pedestrian routes in the public right-of-way, including curb ramps, sidewalks, crosswalks, railroad crossings, and pedestrian signals. Since the transition plan is required to address barrier removal in the city facilities and the public right-of-way, these evaluations are described under section 3 of the plan. Based on these evaluations, the city created an inventory of the physical accessibility barriers found in their facilities and right-of-way to help schedule and budget the removal of those barriers. This slide shows an overview and a blown-up map shown in section 3.3 of the report. These are the locations of 40 evaluated buildings and parking lots. The report also includes a second map showing locations of the 41 evaluated parks and trails. There were approximately 7,000 barriers found within the 81 city facilities that were evaluated. These barriers were grouped into 5 categories. Category 1 includes barriers in the main access routes to enter a facility. Category 2 includes barriers in a program use area, such as transaction counters, conference rooms, restrooms. Category 3 includes barriers to amenities serving program areas, including drinking fountains, telephones, site furnishings. Category 4 includes barriers that are not required to be modified and typically include areas that aren't serving the public or are provided in duplicate, including implementation of an alternate method or location to achieve program accessibility. And category 5 includes barriers in historic sites that may not be required to fully comply with current accessibility standards. Each of these categories are described in detail on page 3-9 of the report. City staff was important in defining criteria to establish the priorities for removing barriers in facilities. The criteria was reviewed during the city's ADA committee meetings. These criteria aren't listed in any particular order, but we're going to just go through them quickly here. Identified complaints or requests, so facilities that have a history of citizen complaints or requests related to accessibility. Level of use by the public, facilities that have a high level of public use. Program uniqueness, some programs are unique to a specific environment or location and cannot occur at a different location. Citizen rights and responsibilities. These are facilities where services are provided to exercise citizen rights, such as voting or jury duty. Geographic distribution, selecting a range of facilities that facilitate coastal or environmental experiences that are distributed throughout the city. Recognized user groups, facilities where programs serving youth, seniors, and people with special needs are provided. And planned obsolescence. These are facilities with identified capital projects that will replace the existing facility. So this set of criteria for prioritizing barrier removal at city facilities are described on page 3-9 of the report. Additional considerations for prioritizing barrier removals may be considered based on the size and scale of a project. Interim solutions involve programmatic solutions that will be put in place pending the implementation of a major barrier removal project through either small or large capital projects. An example of this type of strategy is relocating a program to a new location that has accessible facilities, maybe during a construction project or ahead of a construction project. Maintenance projects are those that mitigate a barrier as part of ongoing maintenance, or possibly without even a building permit. An example of this might be changing door hardware from a knob to an accessible lever, or remounting a fixed unit to an appropriate reach range height, such as a paper towel dispenser. These smaller projects recognize that some larger removal actions will take significant planning, design, and time to identify funds. It allows the city to make progress on quick fixes in the interim while a longer-term planning process is happening. The city intends to address interim solutions and maintenance projects within the first 5 years of the plan. Barrier removal projects affecting the accessibility of city programs at facilities not exclusively owned or operated by the city will be coordinated with the site owner per the joint use, lease, or other agreements. The remaining project types include small and large capital projects and are longer term with higher costs. Small capital projects, when the barrier mitigation will require more planning and construction expertise than a maintenance project, and may require study under the guidance of a design professional. These projects are typically less than $50,000 each. The city categorized these small capital improvement projects as Phase A projects to be prioritized within the first 10 years of the plan. Large capital projects are when a barrier mitigation will require construction expertise and individual study under the guidance of a design professional. Long-term projects may require extended planning and funding. Phase B large capital projects have costs greater than $50,000, while Phase C capital projects require significant reconstruction or replacement. City anticipates that both Phase B and Phase C large capital projects will be completed after the initial 10-year period of this plan. After that initial 10-year period, the city will evaluate the barriers removed, the barriers remaining, and the priorities, and schedule for the removal of remaining barriers. These barrier removal project types and timeframes are described in detail starting on page 3-11 of the report. To further help prioritize and schedule the removal of these barriers, the city has organized their facilities that require small and large capital project improvements into 3 priority tiers, priorities 1 through 3. These 3 priority tiers are based on a combination of the criteria for prioritizing barrier removal, which we just discussed, as well as, sorry, one moment. Council recognized user intent. Okay. Priority 1 facilities meet more of the criteria than those identified in priority 2 and 3 phasing schedules, and priority 2 facilities meet more of the criteria than priority 3 facilities. This is described in detail starting on page 3-13 of the report under the section titled Transition Plan Phasing Schedules. Under this section, the facilities for each of the 3 priority tiers are listed in tables 3.1 through 3.3. The ADA identifies various means for a public entity to comply with accessibility requirements. For example, the city can relocate the service or program to an accessible location, provide aids or services to assist a member of the public with access, or make alterations to the facility. A public entity is not required to make structural changes in existing facilities where other methods are effective in achieving compliance with the ADA. In choosing among these available methods for meeting the ADA requirements, a public entity shall give priority to those methods that offer services, programs, and activities to qualified individuals with disabilities in the most integrated setting appropriate. As we mentioned earlier, the city also performed physical evaluations of the pedestrian routes in the public right-of-way, including curb ramps, sidewalks, crosswalks, railroad crossings, and pedestrian signals. In the public right-of-way, there were approximately 7,400 curb ramp barriers, 88,000 sidewalk barriers, 4,700 crosswalk barriers, 42 railroad crossing barriers, and 950 pedestrian signal barriers. Those barriers are categorized and quantified in multiple tables in section 3.4 of the report. This slide shows the priority matrix we used for categorizing barrier removals at curb ramps. For each of these pedestrian elements in the right-of-way, we used a similar prioritization process. Working with public works staff to define the criteria for removing barriers in the public right-of-way, in this case, we used geospatial criteria established by the ADA, priority A through E described in the top rows. I'm going to read them off here. Geospatial priority A is where there was a public ADA complaint or request from a qualified individual with a disability. Geospatial priority B includes locations serving government offices and public facilities. Geospatial priority C represents locations serving transportation. Geospatial priority D includes locations serving commercial districts and employers. And geospatial priority E are locations serving other areas such as residential areas. This geospatial criteria is coupled with the severity of the barrier, categories 1 through 5. Shown in the first 2 columns of this matrix, the specific non-compliant features that define each barrier category are described in the report after each facility priority matrix. So with this matrix, we're able to identify the right-of-way elements as high priority, medium priority, and low priority. And a similar matrix table was also created for pedestrian access routes, which includes sidewalks and associated hazards, crosswalks, pedestrian railroad crossings. A priority matrix table was also created for pedestrian signals and push buttons. For clarity, the colors in the matrix table in this, there are colors in this matrix table that correlate to a map in the document. This table is shown in grayscale currently. The highest ranked elements are shown in dark gray and include barrier removal priorities A1 through A4, B1, B2, C1, C2, and D1. Each of those combining one geospatial priority with a severity in category 1 through 5. The medium ranked elements are shaded in a medium gray and include barrier removal priorities B3, C3, D2, D3, E1, and E2. The low ranked elements are shaded in light gray and include barrier removal priorities B4, C4, D4, E3, and E4. The elements with no assigned rank have no access deficiencies identified. Those elements are not shaded and include A5, B5, C5, D5, and E5. So barriers in the right-of-way will be removed through a variety of practices and activities such as new construction, roadway alterations, maintenance and repair projects, policies or practices that specifically address the removal of accessibility barriers. City will be focusing its effort on the removal of the high priority barriers over the next 10 years. Medium and low priority barriers will be scheduled on a project by project basis using the prioritization criteria. The city will address barrier removals on an ongoing basis to incorporate barrier removals within projects for new construction and alterations in the public right-of-way as they emerge. And the city reserves the right to modify that barrier removal priority to allow flexibility in accommodating public requests and funding opportunities and constraints. This information is detailed starting on page 3-61 of the report through the end of section 3. The Public Works Director has been identified as the ADA coordinator since 1992 and will continue to act as the ADA coordinator until otherwise announced. The ADA coordinator is the point person for ADA Title II accessibility requests, accommodations, and complaints citywide for the public. Their responsibilities include coordinating with all departments, overseeing the implementation of the self-evaluation and transition plan, assisting with accessible website and information, coordinating ADA training for staff, understanding ADA regulations and best practices, providing updates to the city's regulation and code, and addressing ADA complaints. Finally, providing the public with city's ADA notice of non-discrimination against qualified individuals with disability. The roles and responsibilities of the ADA coordinator is covered in section 5.1 of the report. Additionally, the requirements of the ADA notice are described in section 5.2, and a copy of the city's draft ADA notice is included as attachment A at the end of the report. The grievance procedure is established to meet the requirements of the ADA Title II regulations, and they require the city to develop and publish a grievance procedure to provide fair and prompt resolution of accessibility-related complaints. Santa Clara has had a grievance procedure in place since 1992, and as part of the current project, the city's grievance procedure is being updated to better align with the city's current organization structure and practices, while still reflecting the U.S. Department of Justice's model grievance procedure. First step of the grievance procedure is to file a complaint. A complaint may be submitted by anyone who wishes to file a complaint alleging discrimination on the basis of on the basis of a disability in the provision of services, activities, programs, or benefits by the city. An individual is encouraged to file a grievance within 30 days of the incident and include a description of the alleged discrimination, dates, times, locations, names of offending party, and any witnesses and the desired remedy. The city is to acknowledge the grievance within 30 days. In step 2, the ADA coordinator will investigate the complaint based on the information submitted. And in step 3, the ADA coordinator will review the findings from the investigation. After reviewing the findings, step 4 of the procedure requires the ADA coordinator to provide a response to the grievant. Finally, step 5 allows the grievant to request reconsideration in writing within 30 days after receiving the initial response for review by the city manager. The city manager or designee will respond with the final determination within 90 days. The requirements of the grievance procedure is described in section 5.3 of the report, and a copy of the draft grievance procedure is included as attachment B at the end of the report. I see a question, and I just wanted to acknowledge that that question is in our Q&A queue for the end of the presentation, which is just a few slides. So I'm going to wait to answer that until then, but I wanted to let you know that that's there. So the Santa Clara Draft ADA Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan is available for public review online, and we're accepting comments through November 17th, 2023. If you would like, you can submit your name and email address with your comments through the Q&A function and allow city staff to follow up if clarifications are needed with questions. We'll try to answer a few here verbally as well. But formal comments really should be submitted with your email and your name, or via email to Vincent, who was introduced earlier, at vlucessi@santaclara.gov, which is the city's preferred method for receiving comments. Otherwise, your comments can be sent by traditional mail to the City of Santa Clara Public Works Design Division, attention, Vincent Lucchesi, 1500 Warburton Avenue, Santa Clara, California, 95050, or provided via telephone at 615-3012. You're also welcome to provide comments in person, verbally, or in writing by appointment. Please call or email Vincent Lucchesi to make arrangements at least 48 hours in advance to ensure city staff member is available. If any alternative arrangements or accommodations are needed in order to submit comments, please contact Vincent Lucchesi by email at the email we just listed, or by phone out the same number, or in person at City Hall.
Ryan, would you excuse me for just 1 second if I could interject?
Please.
There is a typo in my email shown on the slide, but if the individuals on this call can direct your attention to the website where the project is posted, and that actually does have the more correct email address. I'll just correct it now verbally, but it's
Great.
Santa Clara
ca.gov.
ca.gov. So sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to catch that while it was opportune.
Thank you for that clarification, Vincent. Okay. For the next steps in this process, the city is going to review all comments that come in, determine revisions to the plan, finalize the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan, present the plan to the ADA committee, and ultimately present the plan to City Council for acceptance. Then the city will begin the implementation phase, start to execute the recommendations identified by the self-evaluation and remove physical accessibility barriers based on the priorities and schedule described in the transition plan. So with that, we're really into the point in this meeting where we can answer questions or comments. I would ask that if you are submitting a comment, if you have a specific comment to leave, to include your email address and your name and in that question. And we'll also address verbally to clarify questions as we go here. I have a first question that reads, are bus stops and transit stations included in the locations serving transportation or elsewhere in this plan? Do bus stops and their surroundings have any accessibility requirements beyond the universal requirements or the usual, requirements for the surrounding sidewalk and crosswalks? One of the things I will repeat here is that if we don't have the definitive answer for you verbally here, we would like to follow up with you. And so if it's possible to include your email address in the Q&A, that would be helpful. Does anyone have an answer to that question on the top of their head?
Sure. If you don't mind, I'll start. I think we would like to, study this question a little, intake it more formally and provide a more complete response than I'll say now. But if I could just give a preliminary response of, in our efforts, there is a distinction between City of Santa Clara facilities and non-city facilities. And what I'm getting at for non-city facilities would be, for example, like the Valley Transportation Authority, VTA. So when the question is posed about transit facilities, I'll just give the example of, say, like the Great America Station or the train station. Those are actually outside the direct control of the city. So the efforts under this plan didn't include transit such as those. But in terms of bus stops, it's a very good question. We did evaluate them insofar as being an element of the City of Santa Clara public right-of-way. And I think the other part of the question was, are there any specific requirements for bus stops beyond just typical sidewalk requirements? And without getting too much into the weeds of what those are, there are actually, in fact, specific requirements for bus stops that are within the various accessibility guidelines that are followed and were included in the criteria used in the field evaluations.
Great. Thank you, Vincent. I'm also going to restate that if you would prefer to ask a question or get a clarification verbally, to please use the raise hand function, which should be available on your toolbar. One other question in the Q&A right now is the My Santa Clara app and website for reporting maintenance issues considered in this plan or elsewhere. It's usually the quickest way to get the city's help to correct, such as debris blocking a sidewalk.
I'll give the same caveat I gave in the answer to the other one, that we would, we appreciate the question. We'll intake it for a more formal response, but as a preliminary response, I don't believe we specifically studied the My Santa Clara app itself in terms of its accessibility components, meaning if a user with disabilities can easily use that platform. But in terms of being a tool within the city's, I guess, platforms of being able to address accessibility issues, I don't believe that was specifically identified as a recommended action, and certainly it's a good notion. And so I think we can entertain incorporating this into the recommendations of the report. And just one final thought, just in relation to the question is, the My Santa Clara app is structured with specific, I guess, issues that are reportable. And if one were to want to use it for reporting accessibility barriers in its current fashion, it's not really structured in that manner. Just by way of example, there could be a sidewalk obstruction, as was mentioned in the question, that can be reported, but it would be reported as an obstruction, not necessarily an ADA, I guess, barrier. But certainly, that's a good question, and we can intake it for consideration in finalizing the document.
Great. One other ask here in the Q&A is a request for a hard copy of the ADA guidelines, and we'll take that into consideration. I think that that's probably something that can be arranged. And then also, are there ADA details for Levi Stadium?
For the latter part of that question about the stadium, I actually would prefer, it's outside my own comfort zone, I'd prefer just to intake that as a question and comment from this
Okay.
meeting,
and we do have a name and email address with that on the comment, so thank you very much for that. Those are all of the questions that have been recorded currently on the Q&A. I would just ask if anyone has any others to feel free to drop them in either there or to raise their hands for quick verbal interaction. We'll just hold some space here to see if anybody else has any other thoughts that come up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and quickly revise the contact slide here so that we can just reshare that for everyone's benefit. So I am sharing again here the public review and comment slide, and I want to make sure that everyone is clear that they can, at the city's website, download a copy for review of the full ADA self-evaluation and transition plan, and can comment on that plan through any of these channels through November 17th, 2023. And all of this contact information is provided. I'm going to read out the email address again, just for clarity: VLUCHESSI at santaclaraca.gov. And again, Vincent Lucchese's mailing address for comments at the City of Santa Clara, Department of Public Works, the Design Division, 1500 Warburton Avenue, Santa Clara, California, 95050. The phone number there to Vincent as well is 408-615-3012. And we are open as well to in-person appointments and alternative accommodations. That contact information is good for setting both of those up. I'm not seeing any additional questions at this time. I would like to respect all of your time and really let you know that we appreciate you spending some time reviewing this plan, orienting to this plan with us. And we will stay on the line for the next 15 minutes or so, but you are welcome to leave at any point that you would like.
Ryan, this is Falguni. Since there is no questions or no communication happening, shall we stop recording? Because we are just blank recording things.
Sure, sure. I am fine with that. I would say that for the participants, the attendees who are still on the line, if you have any final comments, I would encourage you to send them via email. And I will go ahead and turn off the recording at this point, and we can go from there.